Let's go on a date. I need some dates. But first, let's pick a date. What? You don't use Excel to plan your dates because it doesn't have a date picker? Well, go ahead and grab a cold one of whatever you drink, and let's add a date picker to Excel. This is my first video for the channel, so thanks for watching. My plan is to have all the downloads with source VBA linked on my site for everyone to use and learn from. You can download the source code from the link in the description. In this video, I won't go through it all line by line, but I'll code specific concepts so you can understand the core functionality. To get started, let's put an entry point right in the grid so when the user selects a date, they can launch the calendar picker. To do this, we'll just use a simple shape in the grid, and you just drag it out there. We'll make that move with the selection. To rename the shape, I like to use the name box for that. So you just select the shape and type in the new name there. We'll just call it icon. And now we can use that name in the VBA code to reference the shape. Use Alt F11 to open up the VB editor. Drop down and choose the worksheet change event. Whenever the selection changes, this event will fire, and we'll just move the shape around based on that. We just name the shape icon, so we can reference that through the shapes.icon collection. And we'll set its top equal to target.top, and target is the cell passed in through the event. And now you can see as we click up and down the column here, the rectangle is moving with us. It doesn't move horizontally yet, and so we'll have to go set that up now. And this is the same idea as setting the top. But instead of top, we'll set left, and that'll make it move horizontally. In addition to the left, we'll need to add the width of the target as well, so that the rectangle stays on the right side of the cell. And as you can see, as we select around the grid, the rectangle is stuck to that right edge, which is awesome, but it's kind of close. So what we'll do is we'll add a little bit of a buffer and see how that feels. In this case, we'll start with 5. And then you can see a little gap there, but you still want to be able to grab the fill handle easily. We're kind of on top of it still. So let's bump it up to 8 and see how that feels. And it looks like we can easily get to the rectangle and do the fill handle without too much issue. So this is looking a lot better now. And with 2 lines of code, we're able to get that rectangle moving around the grid no problem. Now let's make sure that the rectangle only shows when it's a date selected, because that's when you're likely going to use the calendar picker. So in this case, we'll do a VBA.isDate. So we'll just ask VBA with the value of the target, hey, is this a date? And if it's true, then rectangle appears. If it isn't, then we'll just hide it. And a little optimization you could do here is use the with statement. Since we're using ActiveSheets.Shapes icon, we can just put that with the with. But I'll just leave this sort of spelled out for now. And the way we'll show and hide the shape is to use the visible property on it. And so since this is the true path, we'll set it to true, and we'll have an else here that we'll put false on. And when we set the visible property to false, it's still in the sheet, just can't see it. In the actual add-in, I destroy and create the shape multiple times as the user needs it, so that it's not sitting around in the book. You can see as I select away, the shape disappears and doesn't come back until there's a date. And when I select the date, it comes in. When I select away, it disappears again. So that's great. But if you're adding multiple dates, you might want the rectangle to appear when you select underneath an existing date, but the cell is empty. So there's a way we can do this. On the conditionals for the if statement, we'll just look at the cell above and determine if it's a date. And the one way to do that is off the target, there's an offset, and then just offset -1 to look above on the next row, and then check if VBA.isDate is true there as well. And now when we select underneath the date, we still get the rectangle, but not 2 cells underneath, just directly underneath, since we did the -1 to look right up above. And for the last option for it to appear, we'll check if the cell has the word date in it anywhere. So it could be like product date or just called date. And so if you select underneath a cell that has the word date, we'll put the icon up there. We'll use the instir function to just find the word date in the value, and that'll return a number, basically the position of the word date in the string. And so we can just use that in our if conditional because it'll be greater than 0 if it is true. I typed it out underneath just to make it a little easier to see, and then I just cut and pasted into the actual if statement. And we can see as I click around, it's still working correctly. But if we type the word date, it's showing up on date, which means I did not do the offset. So we need to go back and grab the offset and put that into the actual instir. So we're looking at the cell above. Once we fix that, hopefully it works. Nice thing about VBA is we can make a mistake like this and just quickly correct it and see if it goes. And now you can see when I select underneath date, the widget appears, which is great for starting off a column header of dates. And you can see as I type product date that it still finds the word date in it and it puts the widget underneath. And if I do eat dates, same thing too. And once you go to the website and download the add-in, you'll see there's a lot more checks in the code. All of it's pretty well commented, so you should be able to, with this basis of understanding, go there and follow along. And with that, we're done building the icon. Let's move on to the next part, and that's the form. We're just going to use a simple VBA user form for this. So if you right-click, you can insert that. You can play with the form size a little bit to make it more calendar-like. And then we're going to add a new sub so that we can hook it to the rectangle so that when it gets clicked, it'll call this and show the form. We'll just call the sub show cal for show calendar. And it's really easy to load the form. We just go userform1.show and we'll make it not modal so the user can still click into the grid. And to hook it up to the rectangle, we'll just right click it and say assign macro, and then our macro should be there, our sub, and we click that. And now when I hover over the rectangle, I see a hand. And then when I click it, the user form shows up. And we can still click around in the grid. Everything else still works. The user form sticks there. In the add-in, I actually assign the event through code. So I create the rectangle and then I call the on action and set that event. This is helpful in the add-ins case because I keep deleting and creating the rectangle. But in this case, since we're not doing that, I can just assign it directly. So now let's make it so that if the calendar is up and the user selects a different cell, that the calendar disappears. And we're going to do that by tracking the visible state. And so we'll create a new global variable for just fCalendar visible. We'll put that into the show cal and we'll just say, hey, let's set this to true if we're ever inside of this sub because we're about to show it. And we set it to true after we show the form. And then in the selection change event, we can check if the calendar is visible, and if it is, then we can hide it. And this will fire whenever the selection changes. We're technically not hiding it, we're just unloading the form. And you can see I can click to show it, and when I select another cell, it disappears automatically. You see the form keeps popping center screen, and so let's actually add a module to call some APIs and position the form at the mouse position. You can search the web for a lot of this code. I've got it all in the add-in right now, though, to reuse. Get cursor position will be the main thing that gets it. And since we're calling APIs, we'll need to do a 32-bit and a 64-bit version, depending what version of Excel they're using. A lot of this code is needed to translate the screen resolution and positioning into the actual form location. And then there's a main sub here called move form to mouse. And we set the user form top and left to the mouse position. We also need to multiply it out by some pixel points per x and pixel points per y, which are also functions that help translate the position from the screen to something usable by us. I'd recommend setting a couple of breakpoints to check out the values and how it executes, but for now you just need to know that this will get the XY for the mouse. And so we'll take this main function, move form to mouse, and we'll put this into the show cal function so that once we show the form, it moves it over to the mouse. You can see once we click, the user form is right there. And we can verify that by moving around a little bit and also verifying it's popping up where the mouse is. Now that we got that working, let's start to populate the form. To build the calendar, we'll just use the label control. We'll copy and paste it and build out, in my case, a Sunday through Saturday week. We'll go ahead and put a month and a year label as well so we can see the month and year. And then you can just copy and paste those controls down. You can size them a little bit larger for the days, but do 6 weeks of those, and that'll cover every month. You can also add a little bit of color to it at the top. Make sure that that label is colored and in the back. And then you can change the form color to white. And then when we go and pop it open, it's starting to look like a calendar. To populate the days, we're going to want to loop through all those label controls, but VBA doesn't support controller ways. So instead, what we do is we'll name each one day and then followed by a number so that we can stick that into a for loop and be able to loop through all the controls. An alternate way to do this would be to create a loop in VBA and create these controls on the fly. And then you could create a class file and hook up the events to it that way. But this was just a little bit more convenient for the time. That's one of the other great things about Excel. There's just a lot of ways to accomplish a task. And we'll create another sub here called Build Calendar. And this will actually populate the calendar into the form and put all the right values into the labels that are there. And then we'll buffer out some room in the code just so it fits better on the screen. We'll start defining some of the variables we need to track. Let's start with some of the obvious ones. So we're definitely going to need to know what year we're in. We're definitely going to need to know what month we're in. And we'll use those variables later on to fill out the year and month on the labels on the calendar. And next we'll define a variable for the start of the month. And then we'll define a variable for a tracking date, and that'll be the date we use to start the calendar and start the looping through the days. And we'll increment that date as we go along and use that to fill out the labels. And next we'll add a variable I start a month, and that'll track which day of the week the month starts on. And that'll help us fill out the labels for the current month, the previous month, and the next month too. The C day will be a control, and that'll be each label control that we're about to loop through. And because we can launch the calendar on an existing date or a blank cell, so pending what the cell value is, we'll do a little bit of a check here to see if we do have a valid date. If we do, let's load that date. If we don't, then we'll just default to today's date. And for now, we'll just update the tracking date. So in this case, we'll set it to ActiveCell.value. And in the else case, if the cell is empty, we'll actually just set it to now, which is a VBA function that returns the date and time right now. And then once we have tracking date hooked up to a date of a month we want to load, then we can use some VBA functions to pull out the year and the month of that day and start setting up the calendar. And so for the year, we can just call VBA.year and pass in the tracking date, and that'll return the year into a year. And for the month, we can use VBA. You guessed it, month, and pass in the tracking date again, and that'll return the month into a month. Now let's set the month on the calendar form. And the way to do that is we'll just reference straight into user form 1. I'll go into the controls. We called that control LBL month. We'll set its caption not equal to I month, but equal, we want the actual month name there. So we'll use a VBA function for that called, you guessed it, month name. We'll pass in the month, I month, and then we can say if we want it to be short, abbreviated, or long, and we'll just use the abbreviated version. We want to do the same for the year label, so we'll just reference into, I believe it's called LBL year. We'll set its dot caption, and this one we can set to I year because that'll just be a number, and we don't need to do any translation to a string for the year. And you can see when we load the form, it's loading September 2022 because that's what date is in the cell. And then if it's an empty cell, we do the now. And right now it happens to be June 2022. And now we'll start populating the days of the month. And to do that, we want to start with the first of the month. And we know the first of the month is always 1, and we have our month, I month, and our I year already. So we can just put that into a date serial to create the date. And then from there, we'll want to figure out what day of the week the first is for that month. And fortunately, VBA has a function for that. And so we can use VBA.weekday and then pass in the first of the month, and then we'll get back an integer of what day of the week that is. And for me, I'm going to use VB Sunday as the start day for my week. You could change that to Monday, though, if you prefer. And just to show you what this returns, we can go to the immediate window and just sort of copy paste this out, do a question mark, and we'll pass in the now function just so that we get a valid date return there. And we'll see we'll get back a 2, and that means that the current day of the week is Monday. And you'll get back a 1 for Sunday or a 7 for Saturday. And now that we know that, let's create a variable that will roll through the entire month and just increment by day to fill out the days. Let's call it tracking date. And the way we'll populate that variable is doing a date add, and we'll subtract the start of the month day from the start month, which will put us back into last month. It'll allow us to start populating the calendar from the very top left. Another way to say that is if the 1st of June was on a Tuesday, we'd want the 31st of May to show on Monday and the 30th of May to show on the Sunday. And now that we have the tracking date populated, we're going to start a loop through all the individual label controls for each day and start putting the dates in them. We have 6 weeks and 7 days per, so we know we have 42 of them. So we'll just do a 4i to 1 to 42. And the first step will be to get an instance of the control we want to update to put the day in. And so we'll use cday as the label. We'll just go user form 1 controls. And because there's no control arrays, this is how we sort of hack it, where we say we reference it by name and we just do a day and we add the I to it. And that's why we have day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, etc. And then we'll just quickly set the caption to the tracking date. And we can use VBA.day for that, which will give us the exact day. And then we'll also set the tag to the full date. And the tag is really just any information you want to store with this control. And so we'll just set the entire date into there. And then in the loop, we need to increment. And so we're just going to move it up 1 day. And that's easy to do with a date add of 1. And that'll roll us through the month and also into next month at the bottom of the calendar. If it was June again, we would be rolling into July 1st, 2nd, 3rd, etc. And with that small loop, all the days should populate. We can see here that we have September 2022 loaded and it works. And we can see part of August and part of October. And if we do the now, we see June 2022, we see part of May and part of July as well. So that's great. But let's make the other months a little bit more faded because they're the same color right now. And so that's an easy change to the loop where we're just going to check if the tracking date month is not the same as our current month. And if that is true, then we'll just change the forecolor of the label. In this case, you can go set it and get the value. I already know the value of a light gray here, and so I put that there. And now you can see when we load up the calendar again, the August and October days are light gray and September is black. So that's great. Makes it look more like a calendar and adds focus to the current month. So now let's make it so that when you click a day, it puts it in the cell. We can start this by double clicking one of the labels to get the click event. Then we'll go ahead and make a subroutine that all the click events will go through. We'll just call it day clicked, and we'll have it accept an argument of what label was clicked, and so that we can do the user form 1.controls day and I.tag to get the actual date. Remember, we stored the full date in the tag itself, and so we're looking to use that to populate the cell. And to help compress the code, because we have a click event for everything, we'll use a colon. And the colon basically says new line in VB. And so basically these 3 lines can just sit on one line. And so there's the declaration of the sub, the actual code in the sub, and then an end sub. And we'll copy paste that a bunch of times to help us fill it out. And this will allow us to very, relatively quickly change the arguments passed in, and then we'll have to change the click events as well. But we'll have to do it for all 42 labels. There's certainly more clever ways to do this if you create the controls on the fly for the form and have them hooked up to existing events like that. But this is just sort of an easy way to get things rolling. Then once all of that's created, we can go back into the day click and set the active cell.value equal to the clicked controls tag. And we'll do that by just doing a me, and a me will represent the form in this case. And so me.controls, and then we can do day and the I, the integer that we passed in, to get the actual control. And we'll just say .tag after that. And then once we do that, we can go back to the calendar. And then once we open it, we can click the individual days, and we can see that the active cell is changing based on the day we click. The calendar doesn't disappear. And that could be nice in some cases where you want to calendar up while you're working on a sheet and you want to select around and pick different days and then close the calendar out later. But for the purposes of this one, we're just going to dismiss the calendar once the user picks a day. And that's pretty easy to do. So we just go back into the day click event and we just say unload me, and that'll unload the form. And now we go and click and we pick a day, it goes away. You can see as we select underneath the dates into an empty cell, we still get the picker based on that code we did before. And we can then enter a new date for that cell and continue filling out a column of dates. And with that, we got a basic working calendar in no time. With that, I hope this video has helped you understand how to build the calendar picker in Excel. There's still a lot more to explore. If you go and download the add-in, you can look at the source and see some of the hover effects and some of the mouse wheel scrolling and how to change months. Here you can see for the mouse wheel scrolling, we're grabbing some of the parameters, and so this is more APIs to grab. If you click on July, the view changes, or you click on the year, you get a list of years, and we do some tricks with the form to display those things. So you can go learn all about that by downloading the code from the site. You can also poke into the ribbon X to see how to do a date picker in the Home tab, and some options for showing the icon in the grid and how that icon gets stored. Basically, it's stored as a bunch of code in a cell, and then there's a little write file we do. We create a temporary file and then put that icon into the rectangle. If you want more information on some of this stuff, let me know. I can make another video. And since you made it this far, and this is my first video, I'll put an extra link to a special dance spreadsheet based off of a popular song. You can check that out and download it as well.